Lana pushed open the door to the cottage she'd rented through Airbnb, her breath fogging in the icy air. The listing had promised a cozy, secluded getaway in the heart of the Vermont woods, perfect for a writer looking to finish her novel. The reality was a dilapidated cabin that looked untouched for decades, shrouded in dense mist and an unsettling silence. She stepped inside, the floorboards creaking ominously under her weight. The cottage was chilly, the only warmth emanating from a flickering light bulb that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Lana shivered, not just from the cold, but from the feeling that she wasn't alone. Determined to make the best of it, she unpacked her things, set up her laptop, and tried to settle in. The wind howled outside, branches tapping against the windows like skeletal fingers. Lana tried to focus on her writing, but the atmosphere of the cabin made her thoughts drift to darker narratives. As night fell, Lana prepared a simple meal in the quaint kitchen. That's when she noticed the small, black and white photos tacked to the fridge, pictures of different guests, their faces blurred and expressions distorted. Unease twisted in her gut, but she dismissed it as the product of an overactive imagination. Retiring early to the bedroom, Lana found it hard to sleep. The bed was stiff, the pillows flat, and there was a persistent scratching sound coming from the walls. She tossed and turned, her mind teeming with horror stories she'd read about other Airbnb nightmares. Finally, sleep claimed her. She awoke suddenly in the dead of night, her heart racing. The room was pitch black, the winds howled louder than before, and the scratching had grown more frantic. Lana fumbled for her phone, the screen lit up to show 3:33 a.m. The eerie specificity of the time sent a chill down her spine. Deciding she needed a drink of water to calm her nerves, Lana headed to the kitchen. That's when she noticed it. The largest photo on the fridge now showed her sleeping in the bed, a figure lurking in the doorway barely visible in the dark room. Lana gasped, dropping her phone. The screen shattered, plunging her back into darkness. Her breath came quick and shallow as she backed away slowly. The floorboards squeaked sharply behind her, and she whirled around, but there was nothing. Just the empty, dark hallway and the oppressive feel of unseen eyes watching her. Heart pounding, Lana decided she had to leave, even if it meant braving the midnight forest. She grabbed her keys, her coat, her bag, but as she turned to the door, it slammed shut by itself, the lock clicking ominously. Panic surged. Trapped and terrified, Lana searched for another way out. The only other exit was a small, ground-floor window in the bathroom. She rushed to it, struggling to pry it open, but it was painted shut. As she wrestled with the stubborn window, a low, guttural moan echoed through the house, sending a wave of terror through her. She spun around to see the shadowy figure from the photo standing at the end of the hallway, barely discernible in the dark. It moved towards her, slow and deliberate, its features obscured but its intentions clear. Lana screamed, throwing whatever she could find at the figure. The items passed through it, hitting the wall behind. It was then she realized, with horror, that this wasn't a person, this was something else. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. Frantic, she redoubled her efforts on the window, tears streaming down her face as she heard the figure drawing closer, its moans now a chorus of whispers, unintelligible and chilling. Just as the figure reached out with a hand that seemed more mist than flesh, the window gave way under Lana's desperate strength. She tumbled out into the cold, the ground hard against her, the mist enveloping her like a shroud. Panting, hurt, and terrified, Lana ran through the dark woods, the cottage disappearing behind her, its secrets swallowed by the fog. The forest seemed endless, the trees like specters in the night. Lana's mind raced as she navigated through the darkness, every rustle and crack making her jump. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away. But as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, Lana stumbled upon a startling discovery, a circle of old, stone cottages, identical to the one she had rented, each one decrepit and seemingly abandoned. And in the center of the circle, a stone well, its depths black and impenetrable. Lana approached the well, her curiosity battling her fear. She peered into the darkness, and that's when she heard it, a whisper, coming from the depths, calling her name. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It sounded like her own, but distorted, as if underwater. Lana recoiled, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The whisper turned into a chorus of voices, all calling her name, pleading with her to come closer. She stumbled back, terror clawing at her throat. The sun's rays barely penetrated the thick fog that seemed to emanate from the well itself, casting an otherworldly glow on the scene. Despite the daylight, the darkness within the well seemed to pulsate, beckoning. Lana knew she should run, leave this cursed place and never look back. But something in the voices made her hesitate. They sounded desperate, tormented, as if they were drowning and only she could save them. Gathering her courage, she edged closer to the well again. The voices grew louder, more insistent. She peered into the abyss, trying to discern any shapes in the darkness. Suddenly, a cold wind gusted from the well, carrying with it a foul stench of decay. Lana gagged, her eyes watering, but she couldn't tear herself away. As she watched, horrified, a pale hand emerged from the darkness, grasping the edge of the well. Another hand appeared, then another, all reaching towards her. Faces began to materialize in the dark, their features twisted in agony and despair. Lana screamed, stumbling backward, but her foot caught on a stone, and she fell to the ground. The hands reached out further, their fingers stretching impossibly towards her. She scrambled backward on her hands and feet, her back hitting the rough bark of a tree. The faces watched her, their mouths moving silently as if trying to communicate something urgent. Lana's mind raced. She remembered the photos on the fridge in the cottage, the blurred faces, the figure in her room. Were these the same souls, trapped here, bound to this unholy well? The thought chilled her to the bone. She had to escape, warn others, stop anyone else from suffering the same fate. But as she turned to run, she saw that the mist had closed in around her, the circle of cottages now hidden from view. She was trapped, the well and its ghastly inhabitants the only things clear in the suffocating fog. Desperation set in. Lana searched for any means of escape, her eyes darting around the clearing. That's when she spotted it, a small, overgrown path leading out of the circle. It was narrow and looked seldom used, but it was her only chance. With one last look at the well, Lana sprinted towards the path, the voices screaming after her, a cacophony of despair that echoed through the woods. She ran blindly, branches scratching her face, roots tripping her feet. The path seemed to twist and turn, leading her deeper into the forest, the sounds of the well's inhabitants still audible behind her. Panic fueled her legs, her lungs burning with the cold air. She didn't dare look back, fearing what might be following her. The path finally opened up onto a road, deserted and covered with fallen leaves. Lana paused, gasping for breath, her body aching from the exertion. She didn't recognize this road, but it had to lead somewhere, back to civilization, to safety. She chose a direction and started walking, her pace brisk despite her fatigue. The sun was higher now, but it did nothing to warm her or dispel the deep, lingering dread that clung to her. As she walked, Lana noticed something odd. No matter how long she walked, the scenery seemed to repeat itself. The same gnarled tree, the same bend in the road, over and over. A sinking realization dawned on her, she wasn't escaping. Somehow, she was looping back on herself, trapped in a cycle she couldn't understand. Exhaustion overtook her, and she collapsed on the side of the road, her mind whirling. Was this another part of the curse? Was she doomed to wander this lonely road forever? She closed her eyes, tears of frustration and fear slipping down her cheeks. When she opened her eyes, it was to the sound of a vehicle approaching. Relief flooded through her. Finally, someone could help her, get her out of this nightmare. She stood, waving her arms, but as the vehicle drew closer, her relief turned to horror. It was an old pickup truck, rusted and creaking, moving slowly down the road. But it was the driver that froze her blood, a figure shrouded in shadows, its face obscured, but its eyes glowing a faint, eerie red. As it passed her, it slowed, and the driver turned its head, fixing those red eyes on her. Lana felt a deep, soul-chilling dread, the air around her growing colder. The truck stopped a few meters ahead, the driver's side door creaking open. Lana couldn't move, her feet rooted to the spot as the figure stepped out, its movements slow and deliberate. It stood in the dim light, towering over her, a silhouette against the pallid sun. Lana wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She was paralyzed by an overwhelming fear, the kind that seeps into your bones and settles there. The figure began to move towards her, each step deliberate, resonating with a dread that vibrated through the ground. Lana's heart pounded in her ears, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The figure stopped just a few feet away, its presence oppressive, suffocating. It reached out a hand, long fingers ending in blackened nails, as if charred by fire. Lana recoiled, finding her voice at last, a scream tearing from her throat, raw and desperate. But the scream seemed to dissolve into the mist, swallowed by the silent woods. The figure paused, tilting its head, as if curious about her reaction. Then, in a voice that was both gravelly and whisper-soft, it spoke, the words slithering into her ears like worms. "You cannot escape," it hissed. Lana's mind raced, panic setting every nerve alight. She stumbled backward, her feet finally freeing themselves from the terror-induced paralysis. She turned and ran, not daring to look back, the figure's words echoing in her mind. The road twisted and turned, leading her through an ever-changing landscape of gnarled trees and thick underbrush. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, until she was running through a world gone gray and silent, void of life except for her frantic, pounding footsteps. Hours seemed to pass, or maybe minutes, it was impossible to tell in this place where time seemed twisted, distorted. Finally, Lana saw a light ahead, not the silver light of the sun, but a warm, golden glow that promised safety and warmth. As she approached, she realized it was a house, its windows aglow with light, smoke curling from the chimney. She slowed, approaching cautiously. The house looked inviting, a stark contrast to the desolation she had fled. But after everything, Lana's trust was shattered, every shadow was a hiding place, every sound a warning. She reached the front door, hesitating. Should she knock? What if this was another trap? The door creaked open on its own, as if answering her question. The warmth that spilled out was too tempting to resist. Lana stepped inside, the door closing silently behind her. The interior was cozy, a fire crackling in the hearth, the furniture old but well kept. "Hello?" she called, her voice quivering. No answer. She moved further into the house, her footsteps muffled by thick, soft rugs. In the living room, she found a table set for two, candles lit in the middle casting gentle light around the room. It looked welcoming, but Lana felt a twinge of unease, everything was too perfect, too arranged. As she turned to explore further, she caught sight of a figure reflected in the mirror above the fireplace. Whipping around, she found herself face to face with a woman, older, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes a soft brown that somehow seemed familiar. "Who are you?" Lana asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I'm someone who once made the mistake of coming here, just like you. And now, I'm trapped, part of the house, part of the land." Lana felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, trapped? Why can't you leave?" The woman's eyes filled with sorrow. "Because once you've been chosen by the forest, by the darkness that binds this place, there's no leaving. You become part of it, part of its story. Lana backed away, her mind reeling. No, I'll find a way out. There has to be a way. The woman nodded slowly. Perhaps you will. But remember, the forest is old, its memory long, and its reach far. You can run, hide, fight, but it will always find you. And when it does, it will never let you go. As Lana processed her words, the sound of a truck engine drifted through the air, faint but unmistakable. Her heart sank. The red-eyed driver? Was it returning? The woman seemed to sense her fear. You must rest now. You'll need your strength. She motioned to a door on the side. You can sleep in there. Just for tonight, you're safe. Lana knew she shouldn't, but exhaustion overruled her. She nodded, moving towards the room. As she passed the woman, a whisper, "Be careful who you trust." In the room, Lana lay down on the bed, her mind a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and exhaustion. As sleep claimed her, she wondered if she'd ever escape this nightmare or if the woman's words were a prophecy already set in motion. Her dreams, when they came, were a twisted maze of shadows and whispers, each turn revealing fragments of her day, distorted and menacing. She woke with a start, the room cloaked in darkness, the only light the faint glow of embers from the fireplace in the other room. Lana's heart pounded in her chest as she lay listening to the house settling around her. The quiet was oppressive, heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets. Rising from the bed, Lana moved silently to the window, peering out into the night. The forest was bathed in moonlight, trees casting long, gnarled shadows that twisted across the ground like writhing serpents. Something about the scene outside felt wrong, as if the very woods were watching her, breathing along with her. The sound of an engine pierced the silence, distant yet distinct. The same truck? Panic flared within her, and she stepped back from the window, her mind racing. She couldn't stay here, even if the woman had said it was safe for the night. Whatever was happening, Lana was sure it was closing in on her again. She grabbed her bag, slipping quietly out of the room and back into the living room. The house felt different in the dark, smaller, as if the walls were inching closer together. The table where the candles had burned brightly now held only melted stubs, the wax cold and hard. Lana paused at the front door, her hand on the doorknob, hesitating. Could she really venture back out there, into the woods that seemed to have claimed her as their own? With a deep, steadying breath, she opened the door and stepped out into the chill night air. The ground fog was thicker than before, swirling around her feet as she walked. The road, when she reached it, was just a darker patch in the mist, its borders blurred and indistinct. She followed it, each step taking her further from the supposed safety of the house, deeper into the unknown. As she walked, the silence was broken by rustlings in the underbrush, the snap of twigs, whispers carried on the wind that sounded almost like words. Lana's nerves were taut, her senses heightened to every small noise, every movement. She expected at any moment to see the truck looming out of the mist, or the shadowy figure stepping onto the road. Instead, she came upon another house, its architecture eerily similar to the first, windows dark, the building seeming to brood under the weight of years. The door stood slightly ajar, inviting or warning, Lana couldn't tell. Her curiosity, coupled with an urgent need for shelter, drew her forward. Inside, the air was musty, thick with the scent of mold and decay. Lana's flashlight beam flickered as she explored, revealing peeling wallpaper, dust-covered furniture, and portraits on the walls, their faces scratched out, eyes hollow. It felt as if each step deeper into the house took her further back in time, to a darker, forgotten era. In the kitchen, she found a newspaper dated years ago, the headline chilling, "Local disappearances continue, no leads." The story detailed several people who had vanished without a trace in the area, their last known whereabouts near where Lana now found herself. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she read, the implications clear and terrifying. Moving to leave, Lana heard a noise upstairs, a slow, deliberate thump, like a footstep. She froze, listening. The sound came again, closer this time. Someone, or something, was in the house with her. The realization hit her like a physical blow, fear rooting her to the spot. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Lana waited, her breath shallow, her body tense for flight. But nothing happened. No footsteps approached, no doors creaked. Just when she thought she might have imagined it all, a voice whispered right behind her, "Looking for someone?" Lana spun around, her flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. But there was no one there. Just the empty room and the echo of a question that seemed to hang in the air, malevolent and mocking. Heart hammering, Lana fled the house, her fear a palpable force that drove her back onto the road, back into the embrace of the mist-shrouded woods. The road twisted and turned, never seeming to end, always looping back on itself in a labyrinthine maze. As dawn broke, pale and unsteady, Lana found herself standing before a bridge, old and covered in vines, its wood rotted and dangerous looking. The river it spanned was black and still, reflecting nothing, not even the weak morning light. Crossing it might lead to safety, or to further darkness. But behind her, the woods whispered and the road curled back on itself, offering no escape but the endless loop of fear and shadows. With a deep, steadying breath, Lana stepped onto the bridge, the wood creaking ominously under her feet, echoing the pounding of her heart. Each step was a test of will, the planks groaning, threatening to give way beneath her. The mist clung to her, damp and cold, as if the very air sought to pull her down into the dark waters below. Halfway across, Lana paused, the bridge swaying slightly with a breeze that carried the faintest whispers of the voices she had fled from. Suddenly, the bridge lurched violently, a board snapping under her weight. Lana screamed, clutching at the vine-covered railings as she struggled to maintain her balance. The whispers grew louder, turning into mocking laughter that swirled around her in the mist. Heart racing, Lana pressed forward, the bridge seeming to stretch on impossibly long, the far side always just out of reach. Another plank cracked, and she stumbled, nearly falling through the gap. She caught herself just in time, her hands scraped and bleeding as she pulled herself back up. The voices crescendoed, a cacophony of terror that filled her ears, drowned out her thoughts. They called her name, beckoned her to give in, to join them in the dark waters below where all would be silent, all would be still. But Lana pushed on, driven by a desperate hope that the end of the bridge, the end of her nightmare, lay just a few steps away. Finally, with a last, desperate lunge, Lana reached the other side, collapsing onto solid ground as the bridge fell away behind her, crashing into the river with a sound like thunder. She lay there, panting, her body aching, every breath of victory over the darkness that had sought to claim her. As she lay on the riverbank, the sun finally broke through the mist, weak rays of light scattering the shadows. Lana rose slowly, her limbs heavy, her mind weary. She looked back at the river, now calm, the remnants of the bridge floating downstream. There was no going back. Ahead, the forest opened up, leading to a path she hadn't seen before. It wound away from the river, away from the nightmarish loop of the road and the haunted houses. Lana followed it, her steps uncertain but determined. The path led uphill, through trees that gradually thinned, revealing glimpses of a town in the distance, its buildings bathed in the morning light. But as she walked, Lana could not shake the feeling that something had followed her from the woods, a presence lingering just at the edge of her senses. She turned, looking back down the path, and there it was, a figure, distant but unmistakable, standing at the edge of the trees, watching her. Its eyes, red as coals, burned into hers, a silent promise that it was not the end. Lana turned away, her heart heavy. She knew then that her escape was only temporary, that the darkness would always be a step behind, waiting for a moment of weakness, a moment of doubt. But for now, she had the sun on her face, the town ahead, and a chance to fight another day. And with every step towards the light, she carried the dark with her, a reminder of what lay waiting should she ever stumble, should she ever look back. Thus, the horror followed Lana, a shadow cast by her own survival, a tale not concluded but merely paused, waiting for the next night, the next fear, the next chapter in a story that might never truly end.